All right, and we are live on the PHU Dynasty podcast. This is episode 45, and this is a long-awaited episode. Everybody's dying to get their hands on the latest Dynabook release by your league treasurer and bookie and whatever you want to call them, Los Angeles Lambs, multiple championships. James Seafew, how are you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, glad we could finally do this and got a lot to cover. So excited to get into it. And yeah,
we're going to have a lot going on this podcast, talking about lines, different props, all the kinds of things that James came up with for this season. Before we get to that, we've had a flurry of activity within the last 3 to 4 weeks since the last podcast. So there's a lot going on in the league, and I think we got to recap some of these big trades that have gone down. So let's start off with that, specifically a trade that you were involved in. I can't remember the last time the league has had a three-way trade. It's been a hot minute.
So I don't know if Dynasty's had it, Eric. This will jog your memory. Do you, in redraft, I believe year 1 or year 2, you, me, and Scavelli did a three-way trade. And I remember 2 players involved, Ray Rice and Bernard Berrien. I don't remember the rest. but for some reason I just remember that. And but yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I just don't think there's been any in Dynasty. I don't remember one.
Nothing that I could think of off the top of my head.
And if there was one, it was so insignificant it probably just really didn't matter. But I mean, a three-way trade, and not only was it a three-way trade, but there's huge pieces involved in this as well. So let's throw that down there on the ticker on the bottom because it simply would not fit as a regular graphic. Yeah. I'm going to start it over real quick here so I can see it. So it's Tony Pollard, a 4th and a 4th going to Scavelli. James getting Travis Etienne, Brian Robinson, and Gerald Everett, and then Dustin getting 2 first-round picks, a 24 and a 25, and then a third because he loves thirds. You got to throw that in there too. So basically, the big pieces moving here are obviously Pollard, Etienne in the first. I would say, maybe you can talk a little bit more about some of the other guys you got in your side of the trade with Robinson and Everett, but from your team's perspective, you're already pretty strong at running back with Eckler, obviously McCaffrey and Mixon kind of sliding down perhaps.
He's got 1 year left on his deal.
1 year left, and he's kind of a jagaloon too. So was that the big factor in adding extra running back depth here?
Yes and no. Really the biggest factor for me was changing out Pollard for Etienne, right? Getting younger at the position. And then also I didn't want to have so much invested in the Cowboys, right? Which I already have Lamb, Brandon Cooks signed with or got traded or signed to the Cowboys. So Eric, I was staring at 3 Cowboys in my starting lineup week 1. Now they had a great year. They've been like a top 10-ish offense. I mean, I'm worried about Mike McCarthy calling plays. Like I'm very happy Kellen Moore went to the Chargers where I have obviously other players there, but the Cowboys, I don't know. I'm not that high on them this year. I wanted to get off of Pollard. I wanted to sell him as when I acquired Pollard, it was very much like, hey, I thought he could help me. Like I liked his schedule down the stretch. I thought maybe this guy can help me win a title. Didn't work out. So it was always kind of in my plan to move him. And Etienne's a similar player, 2 years younger. So I felt like the first that I paid was to get 2 years younger, and then I get some kickbacks with like Brian Robinson, who's can be a flex starter. And then Gerald Everett, who Scavelli and I have talked about for like a year now. My tight end situation is a disaster. So Everett is at least connected to my quarterback and was pretty good last year. And they didn't draft a tight end. So I was like, all right, let's just do this.
Yeah. So, and on top of that, Everett's staying with the Chargers and getting Kellen Moore, who used Dalton Schultz in nice ways last year. Maybe he can get something out of him. And I don't think Gerald Everett's a bad tight end either, like just talent wise. He's just nothing special.
He's nothing special, but I don't have anything special anyway. So
that might be a massive improvement based on what you've had in years past. So who knows? But we'll see, how that shakes out. But from a Scavelli perspective, he gives up a first-round pick. I believe it was the 25. Yeah. Was it? Who was the 24 and the 25?
So it was my 20. So I basically wiped out my remaining 24 picks. I gave up my first, third, and fourth. I had already traded my second, but it was Scavelli who traded the 25 first.
Okay.
Dustin and I had been talking, Etienne, some other players for a while. And then Scavelli offered me a 25 first and Everett for Pollard. And once that happened, I kind of had a feeling that's when the deal would get done. Because I knew I told Scavelli, I was like, I don't want future firsts, but if I can trade this future first for a different player, I'm like, let's do this. And that's when we got Dustin involved and, talking late into the night. And
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because it's hard to acquire an asset that isn't going to be on your team.
Right, and I'm a competing team. Like, what am I doing with an extra 25 first? Like, if I don't have like a ready-made buyer, if you will.
Exactly, right? You have to have somebody that wants it like immediately. So that's why I see why a three-way trade makes sense, because I think most of other people in the league has probably tried to do something similar where they acquire value-wise an asset that maybe they don't need or really want, right, but it's still worth something to somebody. So getting that third person involved is very interesting. So I like.
There also was an interest. Yeah, there was an interest from all parties too, to kind of just get the deal done. There was the excitement of doing that, I guess, was cool too. But it really was a deal, I think, that made sense for all teams, right? For Scavelli and the Battle Axes, he gets another. He loves running backs too, and so I was moderately surprised he wanted to trade the first 2 years out, but he feels confident in his team. And Pollard's a good player, and he's fine at tight end, didn't need Everett, and he got some other kickbacks. And for Dustin, he's obviously going through a rebuild, so getting 2 firsts was very attractive to him.
Yeah, and for Dustin in particular, like getting the 2 firsts was so necessary, because it really, at this point, when we'll talk about some of his other trades here in a second, but Dustin is really the majority of his draft capital is so far in the future, where it's pretty much donating money for the next couple of years, unless he tries to get some 24s first. I mean, obviously there's only so many left with Tibbs and I having most of them, so the only way to get them is through deals like this, I guess, at this point, or maybe during the draft next year there's moving around. But realistically, Dustin, he's just trying to get capital for these guys at this point, and I think he did a good job here. I mean, getting 2 firsts is good. Yeah. Granted, they'll probably be late firsts, but
hopefully
first. Yeah, I mean, ideally it would be late first. But all right, let's keep moving. We had another pretty large scale trade here, kind of a shocker perhaps on my end. I didn't really think Dan would make a move like this, but he did come out of the woodwork for this one, and he received Jerry Jeudy, AJ Dillon, and Kadarius Toney, and he gave up a first and 25, a second and 26, and then Albert O, who will likely be cut before the season starts. But basically, I think the meat and potatoes of this deal is probably the Jerry Jeudy in the first. But I thought the value was pretty interesting, because at this point it's kind of weird to think about Kadarius Toney as a throw-in, because he's always talked about.
Yeah, I know.
He's always talked about, and it's just.
I was a little surprised Dustin kind of, because it feels like a little bit of a throw-in, and Toney feels like a player that, I mean, shit, if he has 3 good weeks to start the year before getting hurt, I feel like you could sell him a little higher. But whatever, it is what it is.
I like the idea for Dan specifically, of if it might have ended up costing him that 26 second to get him. Because I really feel like the heart of the deal is basically Jerry Jeudy for a first, right? And then moving the other 2 for basically a second, and AJ Dillon and Kadarius Toney for a 26 second seems like a really good deal to me, just by itself.
Yeah, I also don't know if Jeudy is worth a first alone, right? So that's maybe where some of the math comes in to match up assets, because Judy's been good, but I don't know. Denver's just been weird, and there was weird. He might get traded. Sean Payton's kind of an ass. Like, he likes his own guys. We're not entirely sure how at least I'm not entirely sure how that's all going to work out this year.
I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a weird year.
There was, again, this is a rumorville, but I literally read something an hour before on this pod that, like, oh, the Broncos could have interest in Dalvin Cook if he's released, because the GM who drafted him is the GM in Denver. Like, sure.
I mean, that is exactly why I didn't trade for Javonte Williams, because I was so scared of some dumbass trade like that.
Yeah, again, there's probably nothing going to come of that, but maybe the Broncos, again, I think it echoes the point that you and I just both made, that where the Broncos were a little confused what it's going to be. But Judy's a good player. I also think the other thing that one of my interesting takeaways from this trade, and really the last one, like, I'll speak for myself and really for Scavelli, I think build this team similarly. Like, we double, triple, quadruple down on running back builds, right? Both Scavelli and I are going after running backs always, and someone like Dan is doubling down on the receiver kind of thing, right? I think there's credence to building your team both ways and all that. I just think it's interesting how teams kind of like, we're always kind of staying in with like what we believe and you know, and how we like to build our teams. So this trade maybe was surprising when it first hit, but once I kind of broke it down, I was like, oh, okay, this actually kind of makes sense, you know, based on what this team has done in the past.
Yeah, and once again, I think it's a good deal for both sides because, I mean, realistically, Dan's receiving room with guys like Keenan Allen getting a little bit older, perhaps Julio Jones was on his way out the last couple of years. He kind of needed a little more youth outside of Justin Jefferson, of course. So I think it makes sense. And then Tony is just all upside, right? Like, I mean, if it drills, it drills, and if it doesn't, whatever, move on. But and then Judy, I just looked at his numbers. I forgot he was wide receiver 18 last year. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Okay. All right. I maybe take back a little bit what I said then. Or he hasn't done
972
much,
yards and 6 touchdowns. Pretty solid with a fucking miserable offense.
Yeah. No, there's really no reason that he shouldn't get to that 1,100 mark this year if he's their true wide receiver one. You know, maybe 1,200 yards or so. Yeah, he should be able to get up there. So.
All right, so we got 2 more trades to talk about. We got this next one, both involving Tibbs. Let's get to the first one here. This first one was another one with Dustin. It was Michael Pittman, Rashad Bateman, and Khalil Herbert. For a 24 first. I honestly can't remember who the first was. Maybe you can check that out for me. But 25 second, and then Tucker Kraft. So that, you know, that's a deal that for Dustin's team, it's a little bit of a head scratcher. I think just, you know, Bateman's still young, Pittman's still kind of young, Herbert's definitely young, but obviously he's got a tougher situation now.
Yeah,
I just don't know if this was a necessary deal, you know.
Well, you know, we've started this train of moving guys, so we're gonna keep it going. I think that 24 first was Scavelli's 24 first.
So we're looking at like late
again, probably a late first. From the Tibbs perspective, maybe I'm just because I traded away Michael Pittman in another dynasty league. I just don't think he's that good of a player. Again, maybe I'm biased. It's one of those things where I've watched a few of the games where the Colts play. There's like something missing from him, at least when I watch him. And I'm not saying I
don't think he's a true alpha.
Yeah, I think he's more like, and the issue I have is players with his type of archetype, you know, his big receiver. It's like you're either the wide receiver one or you're like Kelvin Benjamin and you're like out of the league in a few years. And I'm not saying he's going to be that, but a lot of times, like if you're that big bodied receiver, if you don't really become that true alpha one, teams are just going to draft a new one, right? Where if you're like a shifty guy, like you'll always have a role as like a wide receiver, but like they drafted Pittman to be their one. And I don't know if they believe that he's really their one for, you know, the next 6 years or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And I really think his like overall, maybe not like play style or anything like that, but he reminds me so much of like Cortland Sutton, right? Like where he's a guy that, you know, he has the size, he's got this, the look, the feel, right? Like he does what he's supposed to do on the eye test, but then there are times where it's like, well, I really wish I had more out of Cortland Sutton. You know, it's like just.
And there are some big games, but both have had some big games, big stretches. But it's like, like at the end of the season, we're like left wanting more. It's like, man, why didn't this player do more?
Like talent wise, I felt like Cortland Sutton should have been like an Allen Robinson type player back in the day, but it never seemed to materialize. So I just wonder if Pittman ends up in that same like purgatory where it just never ends up being, you know, what you hoped it would be. And really the same could be said for Bateman, honestly.
Yeah. So I think Dustin did all right to get, you know, another first out of this. Like I said, and going back to the point I made previously about on you know, teams like Tibbs has been very vocal that, I want to build my team through receivers. Well, here we go. You know, the headliners of these trades is more receivers when you could argue maybe should have spent a first to get a running back. Again, though, it's hard to, you know, people aren't really just giving up running backs. And
I do think Tibbs position.
Yeah. I do think Tibbs was in on some of he and I talked Pollard a little bit. I'm pretty sure he talked, you know, Etienne with Dustin. Again, things fell the way they did. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just an interesting trade for sure. But, you know, for Dustin, once again, getting a 24 first as opposed to these firsts in like 2029 and shit. You know, it's we're trying to get better as fast as possible.
Correct. He's building up the war chest to be semi-relevant, to try and be relevant next offseason.
Yeah, 2027 looks pretty good for Dustin. So last trade before we get into Dynabook. I love these trades. I've mentioned it before, but I love depth trades. They're my favorite. I love it when it happens. So Tibbs received Dante Foreman and Noah Fant. That gives him the Khalil Herbert and Dante Foreman stack, if you will. And then James picks up 2 depth wide receivers and Donovan Peoples-Jones and KJ Osborne. And we talked a little bit before we, got on air here, but, for James's team, James mentioned to me that, at going into this trade, before the trade, his wide receiver 6, I don't even remember who it was.
Because he shouldn't be anyone's wide receiver 6, Devontae Parker.
Yeah. So it's not great.
And I may cut him this summer if anybody wants him.
I might cut him in Galactic. Like, I'm looking at cutting him. Like, it's just not an ideal situation as far as wide receiver depth. So I think both of these guys, as of right now, you could say they're the wide receiver 2s on their team. Until they're proven otherwise, basically. And
fair enough.
I think Osborne and Peoples-Jones are both talented enough to, even if they got supplanted, they would kind of be in that wide receiver 3 role and maybe give you those, Pierre Thomas-y 3.2, 4 point something games just to throw in there if you need.
The reality is, I think Sean tried to neg me in the chat about like, oh, you need another Tyler Boyd type player, or like what. The reality is, that's what I wanted, because I don't have enough reliable other receivers, right? Like I'm starting 5 running backs opening day with 3 receivers, and that's what it is. But like, I need some depth receivers, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, it's like a semi handcuff because I have Amari Cooper on the Browns. So I always like doing that kind of thing. That's why this deal even got started a little bit, because I was like, Tibbs, you got Khalil Herbert. You're vocal that you want running backs. Let me just give you Foreman. He's not like a locked in starter, but it's a cheap way for you to kind of address what you need. And he literally didn't have a third tight end. So I was like, here, take Noah Fant, because I have 4 other tight ends that I value the same as him. So.
Yeah, I mean, for your team, it just made sense to get a little deeper at a position that you really had to have depth in, and I still think you have to have depth at receiver to win the championship in this league. So
correct.
So even if it's Donovan Peoples-Jones in week 16 against the Jags or some shit, you might need him. So
might need it.
But that's what these depth trades are all about.
Yeah, I do think we didn't mention the Breece Hall and Olave back trade with the Musk. I don't know if we were on the pod or if you had the pod. No, because that trade was I believe was made the same night of the 3-way deal.
I may have missed that. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, I'll just say it. Okay. So it was Alex Morales and the Muskrats receiving Calvin Ridley, Breece Hall, and Jacoby Myers for Chris Olave and an entire 26 draft.
An entire 26 draft. 2026.
Right, 26. So we're talking 3 years from even being discussed about. So I mean, obviously for Dustin's team, he's not going to see any of the real benefits of the draft capital there for a very long time, but gets Olave back after trading him. That trade tree is going to be tough for me to build out this offseason. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
The Breece Hall trade tree too. He's been out. Hasn't Alex traded for him?
He's been out and back. Yeah, at least once.
At least once.
So I mean, from a value perspective, what are your thoughts on the deal? Because I think you could argue that Hall and Olave are probably close in value. I mean, at this point,
similar, yeah, and it makes more sense for Dustin doing a rebuild to take the receiver for the long end, right? So so if you want to call him even in that, but Breece Hall is definitely a little higher, I think, like on KTC and stuff like that. Look, I thought it was a good move for Alex in the sense of getting it was Ridley and
Myers,
said, right? Yeah. So I think that's a good get because Alex, his depth is not great, so he needs some receivers to kind of fill in there. Ridley, there's a lot of good buzz, but I don't know, the dude didn't play football last year, and the year before that, he was kind of not great. So there's some hope there. Jacoby Myers is a fine flex player when you need him. Trading a whole 26 draft though, I just can't sign off on that. But here we are.
I mean, no picks for the next 3 years. It's going to be interesting. I mean, if this team starts falling apart to injuries, this could be This could be an absolute crash and burn situation.
And there's, I mean, we'll get into it very quickly here, but there's a lot of spicy Dynabook lines that involve the Muskrats that, could go sideways if, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think for Dustin's too, I'll make one last point on, Dustin's team, trading Hall away. I mean, at this point, if you're even discussing 2026, I mean, Hall is going to be 25 years old by then. At least maybe even 26. Like, it's not even relevant on your team, really, like, as you rebuild this team. So I really don't hate the deal for Dustin's side either. He gets a good long-term receiver and, manages to get more firsts. And frankly, a 26 first from Alex, in 20 could be very high. So, Alex put a little message about the Brees Hall trade. So clearly I forgot about that one.
It's all good.
We got back to it.
We remember just to trash you, Alex. Don't you worry.
There's always time.
No,
and then he also mentioned quickly before it was the three-way trade was Ian. Alex,
okay. Okay.
So that's the only other three-way trade.
That would make sense. Ian being in, yes, that makes
Surprised
sense.
the kicker wasn't involved.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So those are the trades that have happened since the last podcast. I really didn't think there were that many, but I guess there was. So
well, because the Dustin rebuild accelerated. That Brees Hall trade was the bat signal to the rest of the league to get in while it's hot.
Yeah. So here's all these assets. Let's go, baby.
Because I sent a pretty compelling offer to Dustin for Brees Hall, and he didn't accept it. And then the Alex trade flashed in the chat, and I was like, all right, I guess I'm going after Etienne now.
Yeah, Etienne was. Alex and I were talking about Etienne prior to the draft, and I thought he might have got moved, but he got moved twice since then. it's unbelievable. All right, so let's get into what you're all here for. It's the Dynabook, locked and loaded 2023. James has worked very hard on this, and we've created some graphics so you can follow along. But I'm definitely going to let James talk about the overall format that he used to kind of come up with these lines. But basically the long and short of it is there is kind of like a point total system that he's using. So let's start with that right here out of the gate. James, you want to talk about these? I believe there's 6 different levels of players. So go ahead and let me have it.
Yeah. All right. So I'll kind of start back to even last year when I posted something in the chat of like, doing something similar, like assigning point totals to teams. But what I had done at that time was using ADP of redraft, I think from like Fantasy Pros. So one of my pie in the sky ideas for if I ever get around to, side hustle kind of thing is called subjective analytics. And it's kind of like, it's like 2 words that don't really sound like they make sense together, but the analytics would be looking at the ADP, right? Like actual data that's out there that is market level data, right? People who are doing mock drafts. And the subjective part is this is me saying, this is how I value the players. Obviously I have, I put my own analytical logic into it, this and that, whatever, but this is subjective. This is me valuing the players, right? So these are the 6 levels that I've had. I've kind of done this on my own with my own team of like each offseason or maybe the past 2 or 3 years, I'll look and say, hey, like how many of these types of players do I have? And it's a good gauge to see like how strong I think my team is or whatever. But just kind of I'll kind of run through each player, the thing real quick, right? So franchise cornerstone, unquestioned top player, like you're starting this guy every week, it's cornerstone, right? Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, those kinds of players. Quality starter, a good player, you're starting him every week, but it's more of like, it's not like a locked and loaded RB1, locked and loaded wide receiver 1. Like that player can vary like a little bit. And if you have a really super amazing team, maybe you can even bench this player once, but you're probably starting them every week. But it's like a high end wide receiver 1 or something. What's this? Solid contributor, right? Guy you can start most weeks if you want to, but if you're a really top team, you want to bench these guys, sometimes, right? It's like, I think on my team, like Brandon Cooks is an example of this. Like at the end of the year, like, you're going to get some pretty solid weeks and stuff, but some matchups you may just, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll bench him this week because this is going to be a game there's not going to be a lot of passes and he's a wide receiver too. So I don't want to play him, right? Things like that. Mix and match. This is where like a lot of like volatile and game script dependent running backs are here is kind of how I like to describe it. Guys that like Deontay Foreman to me is a perfect example. I've traded Deontay Foreman away into both dynasty leagues. I had him in both dynasty leagues last year and I traded him away this offseason. he is a maddening, frustrating player. Like, when do I start this guy? Because I had to like predict, do I think the Carolina Panthers are going to win this week? Yes or no? And if yes, I start him. No, and they were so. Anyway, there's a lot of players like that where it's just, man, like if this team is losing, he's not getting the ball, kind of thing, right? So it's a truly mix and match. Developmental prospect, right? It is what it is. It's players who under 3 years starting. I put their established draft capital as requirement. There are a few exceptions, right? Where if it's like a player maybe that was like a 5th round pick in year 2, he was like a 5th or 6th round pick, or like he was like a 5th or 6th round pick, but in year 2 he's showing a little bit more. So there's some gray area, but generally it's like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th.
Would you throw like Kadarius Toney in this range?
No. So Kadarius Toney, I think, was like a mix and match because he's graduated. Because I think he's now in year 4 of the league, maybe, or year 3.
3, I think 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried to keep developmental prospect to players that have only been in the league for 2 years. Well, so maybe Tony's, but like Tony's got a lot of run too. So developmental prospect is kind of reserved for guys who like don't even play that much.
Like still, a Wan'Dale Robinson, perhaps?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, someone like that. And obviously for Eric, like your team is littered with them. Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, like all these guys that you just acquired. And then Jags, just a guy. Worthy talent, but limited impact.
I have those too.
Yeah, so lots of those. But so within these point totals, I was like, all right, within, like, I don't want to be so rigid because then within each tier, there's some variability within it. So within this, I have what's called like a 3 badge system. So it's like badge 1, badge 1.5, badge 2. So basically it's like if I think your player is like closer to the other tier, then I'll put him there. So the highest point total a player can get to is 12 points because that basically that means that they've maxed
the elite.
The elite. And I think it was Jefferson, Chase, CMC, Jonathan Taylor, one more running back, Derrick Henry. Again, and this is through a redraft lens for just this year. There's some element of, hey, it's dynasty and you could trade this player. So that's why like a Jefferson and Chase, maybe are higher than like a Tyreek Hill because you can trade them for a boatload of assets if you really wanted to. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Justin and Dan are very happy with both those players, but in theory, they could, trade them in for 3 starters if they wanted. And also what I did with like defense and kicker is involved in this, but every defense and kicker is just a mix and match. But the ones that were really good got like the 1 badge. So they're actually like a 6-point player. I think like Vince got a badge for Justin Tucker. I gave myself a badge for the 49ers and Eagles defense because they're both really good, like things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really like that too. The badge idea is smart because there are so many players that, you might not put them in that. Let's say, for example, Kadarius Toney, like maybe I have him ranked as more of a developmental prospect. I would give him that highest badge so that he's closer to the mix and match.
And that's what so developmental prospect, yes, there's just, so for your team, Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, like your 1st round picks, they all get 1 badge because it's like a 1st round pick, like that's like considered like a high end developmental prospect. But you can lose that badge if year 1 you do nothing.
Yeah, you suck ass, you're going down.
But for now, like Eric, like your team is littered with like players who have like a 4-point total because they're high end draft prospects. So.
Yeah, and that's what they should be at this point. And as the year progresses, of course, they might go up. So that's a pretty great explanation on the system. So I guess that brings us into this next chart here. This is a graph that James created based on the point totals that he gave each of those teams. So good, James, go ahead and dive into this.
So this is the total points for that the team has, right? And so what it's limited to, it's your top 8 running backs, your top 8 receivers. So that's 16 players there. And then your top 3 QBs, your top 3 tight ends. So now we're at 22, and then your kicker and your defense, right? So basically it's your top 24 players on every team, right? We have a 30-man roster, but not everybody has, it's a 30-man roster, but I'm only counting the top 24.
Yeah, you're not going to want to count Tommy Tremble.
Yeah, it's just too much. And there are some teams that don't have a running back 8 on their team, or they don't have a tight end 3 on their team. So what I did there is I just give them a blank spot, but they get a JAG designation because it means that like if you needed an RB8, you could find some random JAG in free agency and like so you get a point for that. Like I don't give anybody a 0 because you don't roster a tight end 3, like you don't get any points for that. No, that's what I did there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I think this is a good visual, right? So and it's the colors and stuff are in order of like the thing, so you can kind of visually see where each teams are. Obviously, Dan being the belle of the ball of the league, right, has the most franchise cornerstones. Shocker, right? He's got Kelsey, Andrews, Josh Allen, fucking Devontae Adams, even Jefferson, right? So all that kind of stuff. Loaded, right? And Eric, you're on the right there with, as we see, lots of
no quality starters.
But you do have a franchise cornerstone, and I'm sure you can guess who that is.
Yeah, of course, yes. It's Mr. Hurts, yeah.
Interestingly enough, I give the Muskrats no franchise cornerstones, but he's got lots of quality starters. So 2 players are super close to that designation. Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle. They basically get like quality starter and they get badge 2. So they're like a 9.5 instead of a 10. So you're basically there, but it's like, I need to, like, for Waddle, you're not even the wide receiver 1 on your team. So I'm not calling you a cornerstone. It's just, again, this is my system. So that's how I wanted it. And then Najee Harris, the Steelers, I need to see a bounce back here from him, but he'll probably be a franchise cornerstone if we did this time next year. I think if you look at my team, right, if you kind of see in the middle there, I don't have a lot of what I call solid contributors. I think that's emblematic of my team. I have I'm kind of top heavy, right? So I think that, and then you look at like the Bombers, right? They have a lot of solid contributors in there, right? Where it's like a lot of he has a lot of wide receivers in that sort of group. Like the Deontay Johnsons, fucking Marquise Brown, guys who are just like, yeah, like they're good, but I'm not calling them a quality starter, but it's a guy you want to start every week, or a guy that you're probably going to start every week.
I'm having a good time trying to locate what team has the most Jags. It kind of looks like the Long Gamers.
It is, because he has and what's also interesting, he has no developmental prospects because he has no draft picks.
It's hard to get more of them too. So, I think, and it also, this graph really does show how close, most of these teams that are in the hunt, if you will, are. I mean, you got all the way down even to the cheese fries. You can extend it to, where they're only within maybe what it looks like 10 to 30 points, perhaps something like that, between the 2 and number 8. So it's pretty interesting this year for sure. I just love this system that you've created. I feel like we're gonna have to use subjective analytics more often on this show to start classifying some of these players, because like you said, like the badges and the way that's kind of developed allows for a little bit more flexibility, and instead of having such a rigid, this or that kind of thing. So I really like that. I think that is going to be an excellent thing for the league moving forward. So let's go to the next slide here. And I believe this is more of a closer look into those numbers.
Correct. Yes. So first thing you'll notice is the bench plus starter does not add up to that total number is different. So what I did there, it's the bench. So I took your bench number and I multiplied that by 0.25. I think I kind of settled on 0.25 because if you factor in bye weeks and expected injuries, about 25% of the time you're gonna have to bring someone up from your bench. So that's why I gave that 25% score there. What's not really factored in this, and what will have to come in down the road in a version 2, version 3 of this, is the long gamers are higher on this than I feel like they really should be, and that's going to be sort of seen in the lines later, that he's higher or the long gamers are higher because his backup quarterbacks are so good. But it's you're not starting, how much value is he really, Justin Fields, I think I have as a quality starter with a badge 1. So that's an 8.5 point player.
What's Dak like? He's not even.
I think I had Dak as a solid contributor. I think.
That's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points that he's getting no use out of. And again, it's tough to trade quarterbacks in this league, and it's tough to get value. And maybe maybe the long gamers missed the boat and missed the window on when they could trade a quarterback, right? Because teams have kind of made their decisions now at the draft. Look, it's not a bad, Lamar Jackson gets hurt all the time. Fields gets hurt too. So it's not a bad thing to have two good quarterbacks like that. But that is something that I think in a future iteration of this, I may want to, again, even running backs, I may want to wait a little bit more. I tried to do things be a little more lenient with badges to running backs and more strict with badges for receivers to try to do a little bit of that. But I think I need to capture the positional value a little bit better in a future version of this. But all in all, I still think this is a pretty good distribution of like of how I see the league.
Right. So, I mean, you could almost say this would be close to like a power rankings, if you will.
It is this is pretty much the power rankings, except a little long gamers, bombers, and muskrats have flipped a little bit, but I'll get into that, next slide or whatever of why that is. But yeah.
All right, let's go then to the next slide. So we have the title odds, and James has designated that these are eligible for $20 bets. So,
okay, not this.
Is it not this one?
No, yeah, it's just the win lines. But that's
okay.
The word document I sent, yeah, it got all jumbled, so it's all good. But
okay, go ahead and talk about this one first, then.
Yes, just what I will do though after this, sometime tonight, I'll upload like a Word document with all of the Dynabook stuff, where like you can open that and then decide, and then submit all your picks in the Discord there, and I also will upload the Excel of the grouping, the player grouping, so you can see your own team and how I grade, why I graded your team the way I did, if you care to look. Anyway, the title odds, right? So very close to what the power rankings are. Like I said, really the only thing that changed was the long gamers were 5th in the previous thing there, but now they're 7th here, and that's pretty much what this is. And even myself, the Lambs, I had a higher starter score, but a lower bench score than both the Lionheads and Battle Axes. I also took a little bit of that schedule stuff that I posted a few weeks ago. I factored some of that in as well. The Battle Axes drew a nice schedule where they play the bottom 3 teams there, right? So that's a nice...
That always helps.
That helps. Or to play those bottom 3 teams twice, so that's 6 games against, teams that you should be better than on paper. Although the Cheese Fries have made some nice trades and seemed like they're not a true rebuilding team anymore, but they're kind of in that, waiting to officially break out of that tier, if you will.
Right.
And obviously, the Plague are obviously the favorite again, but I don't think I've mentioned the Lionheads too much here, but with the Bijan trade and just I expect some of the bad things that happened to this team last year to kind of reverse back. And like I said, I'm a big fan of the Bijan trade and even getting Pacheco, some other moves this team's made. I like pissed off Rodgers on the Jets too. I think that'll help from a fantasy perspective.
I think so too.
And look, this team, obviously they had a down year last year, but there was kind of the Lionheads kind of injuries, and they kind of decided, you know what, I'm going to sit out a year on the arms race. I'll get you guys next year. And I think that's looking to be a fairly shrewd move, because while teams like the Muskrats and Long Gamers have kind of, they had no draft picks to get better, the Lionheads were able, I felt, to, make some moves. And previous years, the Lionheads, they won the points title. But like, this was an up and coming team that like Dynabook thinks last year was the exception, not the year before. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, the Lionheads lose Cooper Kupp last year. They lose Javonte Williams.
Yeah,
arguably they're top 2 at each position.
True.
And then on top of that, Aaron Rodgers kind of wasn't really Aaron Rodgers entirely last year. I mean, there's just so many ways for all these things can kind of turn around. And then when you add in the fact that he got Bijan and then Pacheco, who I still don't think that guy is talked about enough. I feel like he is a legit player, and I think
Pacheco.
I love me some Pacheco, and I loved him. That's why I made the trade for him originally, because I just believed in the talent.
Yep.
And I think I traded a third for him, but I mean, he's a guy that if you look at, just from a value perspective, I hate to call him a throw-in in that deal with me, but it wasn't really a throw-in. But Bijan was kind of the star of that deal, obviously, so like he kind of gets overlooked in that scenario. So I think he's a RB2 honestly this year, and the fact that honestly, the fact that he's got Bijan, he's got Cam Akers, who kind of turned it on last year a little bit. He's got guys. So, and then if Javonte, picks up his shit this year, it looks like a pretty damn good team. So I feel like he is kind of right in that top 3 for me for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the next slide here, and this is win lines here.
Lines, yes. Okay, so these lines are eligible for the $20 bets.
Gotcha.
Because it's minus. So that was kind of so new this year is we are allowing up to $20 bets on the lines that are these standard lines. And in the future slides, we'll see that we have some prop bets that may not vest for years. Like we have, we'll get to it. But those are the new things, the new exciting things at Dynabook headquarters this year. But yeah, so these are the 20. If you want to bet $20 on these, you can, or 10, 5, whatever you want to do. Again, I want to start at the long gamers here, right? So they were higher on the system that I did earlier, but I want to kind of use a quote that I've heard recently and that I think applies. Like, when doing analytics and things like this, sometimes the best way to use analytics is knowing when to not use them and when to use a little bit of logic and think outside the box, right? Analytics are a guide. It's not the be all end all. And any system and any projection or model you build should never be the final product. I'm a believer you should always make those kind of final edits from sort of like a, bird's eye view overall thing. And the reason why the long gamers, because I had them at 7.5, and I've heard some chatter in the league where teams have, either trying to trade with this team, or I just heard other teams say, I don't think this team is that good or whatever. And it's just the running backs are a concern outside Jonathan Taylor. But there's a lot of talent on this team. So I would not be stunned if this team got to 8 wins or something like that. So if you believe, Sean, if you believe, bet your team. I also think the long gamers had a slightly tougher schedule too. So that also kind of factored in to kind of drop them to there.
Yeah, the Armadillos fans are thrilled to see 3.5 wins this year.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. What do you think? Over, under?
It's I tell you, it's a good line. It's close. Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can sneak obviously the Elk, that's a good matchup for us. Might get 2 there. Do we play them twice? I don't even know.
I don't think so. No, you got hosed with this. No, yeah, from I remember, you got hosed with the schedule. Like, you don't play the Elk or Cheese Fries twice.
Oh, that's brutal. Jesus Christ. So all right, maybe I'll take the under. I don't know. Yeah, I think there's a few on this list. I mean, obviously, there's what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are within 1.5 of each other. There's gonna be a lot of. I'm interested to see who really believes in their team or not. If you're gonna take the overs on your own teams, because I think that'll be very telling into the future of your team as well. So I feel like the Muskrats at 7.5. You got to think Alex smashes that, right?
Probably. I mean, he didn't get 7. I think he hit 7 wins on the number last year. Or did he hit 8? I forget. It was right around here. But yeah, smash that over if you want.
I mean, I'm not going to do it, but he's going to do it.
Yeah,
it's a bold bet for me. I can't in good heart bet on that, I don't think. But the Bombers at 8.5, another enticing one for me again this year. So, you're just making it nice and easy for me. All right, let's go to the next slide here. This is the week 1 lines, which is something brand new this year.
Yeah, so it's another just fun thing that I thought that we could include, right? Week 1 lines. We're not doing this every week. I just figured we got the whole summer, and I don't know everybody's starting lineups. More trades could happen, but based on just some of the projected totals that I remember in the past and how I think of these teams, I feel like these are fairly good lines for week 1. Obviously, the Lambs here is the closest game, but I think that makes sense. Lambs, Muskrats, we are
team's great.
Yeah, we're ranked. I think I had myself 4th and the Muskrats 6th or whatever, 5th. So it's right on schedule there. I think we had a 4-point game last year, so it's not that really matters. But yeah, and look, and the Plague, the Lionheads are my number 2 team in power rankings, but that is kind of how I see and how I think the league sees the Plague too, right? So that's another element always when making lines and quick NBA side thing. That's why I think teams like the Celtics are always massive favorites, because Vegas knows their idiot fans are always going to bet them even when they shouldn't.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to say the Plague are the Celtics, by the way. I'm just saying that the team that's popular, the perception, right? Perception matters.
Yeah, it's like the Cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. Like the books have to protect against the fact that they know Cowboys bettors are going to bet, even if they shouldn't, but they have to protect against that.
Right. Well, we're gonna try to beat the spread against the Bombers.
Yeah,
that's gonna see. That's the thing is, I like the lines per game because it really gives you potentially some rooting interest when your team sucks ass, right?
for
So
sure.
it could be fun, and obviously you won't do it every week. It's just way too much fucking effort.
Yeah, and with bye weeks and injury, no, but yeah, obviously, like week 1 is as good of time as ever to try something out like this. And yeah, like I said, these are also eligible for $20 bets. So if you want to get,
if it works out, maybe we do a week 8 one or maybe some
yeah,
playoff ones.
yeah, for sure.
That'd be kind of fun.
For sure.
To keep things interesting for the teams that are out of it potentially too. So let's keep it in mind. All right, this is another cool one too. So
yes,
this is a team secures one of the top 2 seeds this year. So this is kind of, I would imagine this is a bet for the muck, right? Like the kind of the grouping.
Look, and obviously, you see the plague there, and this, again, the official document will be in the Dynabook. These are not eligible for $20 bets. I can't allow, risk of plus 350 if the long gamers hit, right? Anyway, but the plague at minus 320, it shows, right? Like we really expect that team to be a top 2 seed again, right? That's
sure. They're going to have a bye in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to, throw a little something on that, I think that nets out to like $4 or something, have at it. But yeah, the rest of the team, kind of like you said, there was 5 teams within 1.5 wins of each other, and that's kind of shown here. I think it's going to be a super tight and interesting race for that 2 seed. Last year, the Bombers got it. And unfortunately it didn't work out because they lost in their playoff game, but they were very close and almost got to the title game. But yeah, the Bombers have a solid chance here. And even, the cheese fries were not originally on this thing, but once they've made a few trades, it's like, you know what, this team is, they see something in their team and they're trying, and hey, you never know. So they're on the board.
Yeah, I think the cheese fries are potentially closer than people think. I mean, all it could take really is, a great Rashad White breakout year, and maybe getting some other guys going on more of a breakout type of thing, like for example, Drake London, if he takes that next step, perhaps. And of course, he's got Patrick Mahomes on a week-to-week basis. So exactly. I mean, like it's not out of the question that he gets in the playoffs, A, and then B actually, does anything in the playoffs. Yeah, it's not out of the question.
If you remember long ago, there was, I forget what year it was, but back in the Louisville Chupacabra days, if I remember correctly, stole a 2 seed when the team, was 5th. Like, I think they were like 5th or 6th in points for, but ended up the 2 seed just because
you run a good schedule.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So you never know. So
you never know. I like having them in there. It'd be a fun one to bet if you're the cheese fries owner there at Tibbetts. Maybe Tibbers would want to do that one. So, all right, next slide. Oh boy, here we go. The wild ride.
Yes. Mr. Toad's wild ride in 2024. So this is just simply of these 5 teams these 5 competing teams that have traded their first, who has the best season? And that's defined by, the latest original draft pick. So if the Battle Axes get to the title game again, but lose to the Plague, then that would be the winner here. Or if the Muskrats win the title, right? Then, that would be the one that would win here. So if you think your team's going to win the title or be second place to Dan, this is a great bet to make with out of these 5 teams. But again, this is kind of the general flow of the rankings have been, right? Like I feel like the Lionheads and Battle Axes are a cut above the rest of the other contenders, but not that far ahead.
Right. And yeah, like you said, like this is the latest draft pick. So this would be just basically wherever you end up after the playoffs are said and done, essentially. So just keep that in mind if you want to make that bet. And then also Mr. Toads has an inverse of this. So
yes. And so this is Mr. Toad's Toaster Coaster is these teams have traded their first in the next 2 years. But I didn't want to do who has the most cumulative wins, because I figured it like the Plague would just get bet. It just wouldn't even be a line. So I flipped it on its head and said, who has the least cumulative wins? Now the Long Gamers had the lowest line for this year. Next year, who the hell knows? But I feel this is a pretty good distribution, right? I do think, again, because I have to protect again this year, I think the Long Gamers are the behind the Muskrats, whatever. But the Muskrats definitely could, like we talked about earlier, if the bottom falls out, you never know. And even the Battle Axes, right? Like there's a lot of older players on this team, man. You never know, right? Like
Yeah, another
And
Derek
again,
Hendry injury.
Yeah, and this is again this is a like this bet doesn't vest until next. So like no matter what, you're not getting paid out this year. It's this doesn't vest until 2024. So, but again, it's a fun thing that I'll keep logged if anybody bets it.
Yeah, I'm interested. I think these Mr. Toads ones I'll probably chuck a bet on just because I like to have a rooting interest in some of these playoff. Yeah, just in the playoff teams, so or the projected playoff teams, I should say. So, all right, and then we have of course the rebuilding wars. How could we forget?
Yeah, and so some of these other lines too. So yeah, that was one of the other new wrinkles for Dynabook we're trying out this year is the $20 bets for for some of the lines, and then also these lines that again could vest this year, or I mean hell this particular bet may not vest for 3 years. I tend to think it'll by next year. I expect one of these teams to make the playoffs, but you never know, right?
So yeah, I mean, we were just talking about the cheese fries potentially even getting a 2 seed. So yeah, I mean, technically, you could bet on this year and have it roll right in into your vesting. So, yeah, so I like the rebuilding wars. I think we should have another one next year called like storage wars, just like who has the most picks by the end of the year or something. Yeah. I don't know.
That's a good one. I like that. The storage. Okay. Yeah.
Just an idea. And then here's some prop specials. Now I always love a good prop bet. I love betting prop bets more than anything. So I'm glad that there's tons of them this year to choose from.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So all of these, this entire sheet, this entire section here, these are all eligible for $20 bets as well. And again, these are the first two there obviously will vest this year. This is very simple. Do the Muskrats give away a top 5 pick again? Yes or no? Very simple, right? So this year, yeah, the pick that they traded it was pick 5, right? And pick 5 basically means you were the worst team, you were the worst team in the playoffs, right? Which is what happened. The Muskrats got the 6th seed, unfortunately lost, give away pick 5.
Right.
So that could, and what could also happen, you could be the 5 seed, and what's the scenario? Yeah, you could be the 5 seed and lose, and if the 6th seed wins and the 3 seed loses, then guess what? You give away pick 5 in that scenario too. So there's a few routes where this could happen again, or he could just miss the playoffs altogether. So.
Yeah, I like that one, and of course we have the war ones are new this year. I definitely have never seen that. So yeah, maybe you want to explain that a little bit.
For sure, yeah. So these, I feel like this has been a bet that's been talked about in previous years. I'm going to win a title before you. Tibbs and Alex, Muskrats. Just now, you can put your money where your mouth is. And again, the funny thing is, some of these bets may not vest for 10 years in theory. But
yeah, I mean, if everybody just keeps stuck.
You never know. Recent chance war, me and Scavelli here. I don't know, one of us could go on another run, but we have some older teams. You never know. One of us may hit the rebuild button in the next 2 years, and we're super far away from winning a title. So there's a lot of fun things with that. Rising contenders, right? The Lionheads and Bombers are 2 teams that I feel are, again, they're rising contenders. They are on the short list of and they have young players too. So that's one that I would expect to vest in the next 3 years, let's call it. But hey, you never know.
Could take a while. And if you want one that really takes a while, you go to the Central States War.
The Central States War. Yeah. So this is a real saucy one for the long gamers, right? You're the best team of these 3 for now, but those other teams have picks. And again, this is a Dynabook special. I'm allowing this one just, even money across the board. So that's a
fair.
Fun one.
Yeah. I like all these. I think there's a lot of options, and especially with, of course, just like the regular old lines and whatnot. So if you can't find something to bet out of these, I don't know what to tell you. I think you're pretty well covered. So that looks pretty sweet. So James, that wraps up the Dynabook discussion and lines. Is there anything else regarding Dynabook that you want people to know at this point as we head into the season, or is that kind of it?
No, like I said, that's just a bit. We went over the stuff. Like I said, I'll post I'll post a Word document in Dynabook, and then read through it, and create a your own sheet of what you want to bet, and I'll put it into the thing and be ready to go. Yeah,
ready to roll. James, just if you really had to say, do you think Do you think you're going to win the championship this year? I just want to know.
For
do you really
my
believe
team?
that your team's going to win?
I mean, I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made the trade that I did, right?
Yeah.
And I will, again, not that I want to use, if I started this guy, I would, but it's true. If I would have made one different change, I would have beaten Sean. And then when Mike Evans had the monster game, that was championship week. My team scored like 180 points championship week. So if I would have made the championship, I would have won. Again, right. that doesn't to me, all that means is that, hey, I feel like my team is still close. It's like Austin Eckler and Joe Mixon are on the last year of their contracts with their teams. It feels like this is like the last real hurrah.
I think that's totally accurate. Like that's kind of how I'm viewing your team at this point, if we're being honest. Like we do have, even if we're talking about guys that might be towards the end of their hurrah, if you will, like Mike Evans would be another one.
Yes. I mean,
well, so
Mike Evans, and even, CMC is, he's on hole 13, maybe hole 14, teeing off on 14, something like that.
Yeah, he might be on the green of 13, 14.
12, yeah, like he's definitely on the back nine. So
yeah, I can't. I think he's 26.
Yeah.
So 26. I mean, yeah, but he also is such a transcendent talent that he might be sticking around here. So,
but yeah, look, the way I see it is I have an answer at RB1, CMC. I have an answer at wide receiver 1, Lamb. Sure. And I have a quarterback, Herbert, who's fine. He was that was a big reason why my team, I felt, wasn't as good last year. Herbert was QB 11. The year I won, he was QB 2.
Yeah, he kind of slowed down.
He did not even score 10 points in my playoff game that I lost. You can't win with that.
That's tough. No, that's tough. And frankly, he was playing last year injured, I think.
Yep.
So
he
great.
Broke the ribs, and then I'm very happy with the Kellen Moore signing.
I think so too, and the fact they got him and Eckler, maybe get back to that great stack that they were. I mean,
that's the thing. Yeah, Eckler, the Chargers have made, again, Eckler popped off because they did the same thing because they told Melvin Gordon to kick rocks, right? So so Eckler, very it's true. Man, don't you know how you were made? This is what it is. So, with him and Mix, honestly, I was concerned Mixon might be cut. I know I made a meme early in the year of because the arrests, and the team was saying, oh, we don't like him. The fact that they didn't draft a running back, I think they drafted him the 5th round.
Chase Brown.
Yeah, whatever. He's fine prospect, but no day two or first round prospect. So I was like, okay,
and they didn't bring back P. Ryan either.
And they didn't bring back P. Ryan. So again, I think both with Eckler and Mixon, it's all right. When I traded, it's it feels natural. Let's finish out this this window, because I traded for them knowing they both had matching 4-year deals. They both got injured year 1. Let's ride this thing out.
Now you got Travis Etienne to kind of
and Etienne's a player I could trade next offseason if I wanted to or whatever. But
there's flexibility in the roster.
Basically, it's Herbert and Lamb can go forward. The rest of the team is on borrowed time. That's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, it is kind of a team that has the talent for this year to do something. So, why not capitalize on it while you got it? So, totally makes sense to me. All right, so we're at right around an hour, so that's perfect timing. James, thank you very much for that. Allows a lot of work on Dynabook. I hope everybody appreciates the work that James did on that. I'm personally going to be looking more into your badge of honor system, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think that is something for future episodes of the podcast. We could really, when people come on to talk about their teams, or maybe we do team reviews and things like that.
Yep.
Maybe we can make it kind of like a gold-ish standard of kind of how we discuss about our players in our league. So I'm a big fan of it. So thank you again for all the hard work. And we will see you next time on episode 46. Hopefully we get something soon. Got lots of stuff planned. However, if you do have any ideas or anything specifically you really want to talk about, it doesn't have to be an hour-long episode. We can do 10-minute long YouTube video style, anything. We could do 30 minutes, whatever you want. We got a long off season. So if there's anything you want to talk about, let's get it going, and we'll see you next time.